Okay, so have you ever felt like, I don't know, your body's just sending confusing signals? Maybe things that seem totally unrelated.
Like what kinds of things?
Well, maybe those headaches that just won't quit, or sometimes that weird feeling of pressure in your head.
Okay, yeah.
And then there's the gut stuff, like getting really bloated and uncomfortable, maybe even painfully so right after you eat.
Right. Even if you didn't eat that much, that fullness.
Exactly. Or maybe skin things popping up out of nowhere, like flushing or itching, or suddenly having worse allergies than you used to.
Yeah, allergies can be a big one. Sneezing, itchy eyes.
Totally. And sleep. Feeling just wiped out after eating, but then boom, wide awake a few hours into the night.
Like you could run a marathon, but you're actually exhausted.
Right. So if any of that sounds familiar and you've been kind of scratching your head looking for one explanation, then this deep dive might really resonate with you.
Because today we're focusing on, well, a single molecule that the source material you've shared points to as being potentially central to a lot of this.
And that molecule is histamine.
That's the one. It's really fascinating, actually. The sources describe it as being involved in so much.
Like brain function, sleep.
Digestion, the immune system.
Mm.
It plays a role in a lot of key processes.
But while it's crucial.
Right. Absolutely vital. But the sources highlight that when you have too much, they sometimes call it histaminosis, that's when you can run into these widespread problems.
So our mission here really is to unpack the source material you sent over.
Exactly. We want to guide you through it to understand, what histamine actually is, what it does, the symptoms you might see if there's too much.
And importantly, why that might be happening according to these sources. The root causes.
Yep. And how it might be detected. And crucially, the natural approaches the material suggests for getting things back in balance.
Basically digging into these notes and articles to see what insights we can pull out together.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start with the basics from these sources. What is histamine and what does it actually do? They really emphasize it's not just about allergies.
No, not at all. It wears many, many hats, as the material lays out.
Hmm.
In the brain, for instance, it's a neurotransmitter.
Okay, like serotonin or dopamine?
Kinda, yeah.
Ugh.
It's involved in things like managing your appetite and is a big player in your sleep-wake cycle.
Ah, so that connects to the weird sleep patterns potentially.
Correctly. The sources mention it influences whether you sleep well or, have that disturbed, restless sleep we talked about.
Interesting. I wouldn't have immediately linked histamine to appetite and sleep quality like that.
And it's just as critical, maybe even more obviously, in the digestive system.
How so?
Your sources explain it's essential for getting your stomach to release hydrochloric acid, stomach acid.
Right, which you need to break down food.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When food hits your stomach, specific cells release something called gastrin, and that stimulates histamine release. It's the histamine that then tells your stomach, okay, make acid now.
And without enough acid.
Well, the source is pretty blunt. They say a dysfunctional stomach is often one without enough acid. Digestion just doesn't start properly. Food isn't broken down like it should be before it moves on.
So if histamine's role there is messed up, the whole digestive chain kind of falls apart from the beginning.
You got it. That's the picture the material paints.
And the sources also mention it has a role further down in the intestines.
Yes, intestinal motility.
Yeah.
Basically, how things move through your gut.
Ah, so too slow or too fast.
Exactly. Poor histamine management here, according to the sources, could lead to constipation, or the opposite, things moving too quickly. Either way, it messes with nutrient absorption and keeping your gut microbes in balance.
Okay, that gut microbe connection sounds important.
It is. The sources even pose that question, does dysbiosis, that imbalance of gut bacteria, cause the histamine issue? Or does the histamine issue disrupt the gut bacteria?
Like a vicious cycle.
They suggest it often is, highlighting just how interconnected gut health and histamine levels really are.
And then, of course, the role most people do know histamine for the immune system.
Right, the allergy connection.
Yeah.
It's absolutely central to activating your immune response. When you have an injury or an infection, histamine helps widen your blood vessels.
Vasodilation?
Yep, vasodilation.
Mm.
It makes them more permeable, kind of leakier.
Why would it do that?
So your immune cells can get out of the bloodstream and reach the trouble spot much faster. It's crucial for defense and starting the healing process. It also helps manage inflammation and tissue repair.
So it's necessary. A good thing, normally.
A very good thing, when it's balanced and doing its job correctly.
Okay, so looking at all these different jobs, brain, gut, immune system, it suddenly makes a lot more sense why problems with histamine could show up in so many weird, seemingly unconnected ways.
Exactly. When the levels are too high or the body just can't clear it out properly, that histaminosis, the sources talk about all those vital functions can go haywire. And that leads directly to that confusing list of symptoms.
Like the head stuff you mentioned.
Yeah, the sources list headaches, feeling foggy or embotamiento, as they put it.
Brain fog, basically.
Right. Migraines, just chronic headaches, even that sensation of pressure on your head, all linked in the material.
And the digestive symptoms seem really common based on these notes.
Definitely. That bloating right after eating, sometimes painful abdominal distension, feeling full really quickly, but it's uncomfortable, not like you're actually satisfied. Slow digestion.
Even pain when you haven't eaten much?
Yep. Abdominal pain, acidity, gastritis, reflux. They're all listed as potential signs in the sources.
And the skin reactions and allergy type stuff.
Also classic signs according to the material. Reddened skin, flushing, especially maybe face and chest after eating, itching or pruritus, skin breakouts.
And the sneezing, itchy nose, throat, eyes.
All those typical allergy symptoms. And, your sources make a good point. Antihistamines might calm these down temporarily.
But they don't fix the reason the body's overreacting with histamine in the first place.
Precisely. They're just managing the symptom, not the underlying cause described in the material.
Okay, and that really strange sleep pattern, feeling super sleepy after meals, then wired later.
That's one of the most fascinating connections the sources draw, I think. That heavy, overwhelming sleepiness post-meal, postprandial somnolence. You just want to pass out.
Yeah.
But then, paradoxically, you wake up maybe 2-3 hours later feeling restless, agitated, like buzzing with energy almost.
Like you could run that marathon.
Right. And you just cannot get back to sleep,
Mm-hmm.
which, of course, leads to feeling completely exhausted during the day despite being wired at night. It's a really disruptive cycle.
Wow. The sources also add dizziness and feeling kind of permanently unsteady.
Dizziness and instability are mentioned, too. It really underscores how one single molecule being out of balance can cause ripples across so many different bodily systems.
It's kind of mind-blowing. So listening to all this, do any of these symptoms or connections suddenly click for you? Do they seem maybe less random now?
And this really leads us to the core question your source material asks. Okay, why? Why does this happen? If the body is supposed to manage histamine, what's going wrong?
Something's interfering with the balance. And the sources point fingers at specific enzymes, don't they?
They do. These enzymes are like the body's histamine recycling crew. They break it down. Your sources focus on two key ones.
DAO is one.
DAO, exactly. Diamine oxidase. Its main job, according to the material, is handling histamine in your digestive tract, especially histamine coming in from foods.
Okay, so DAO is a gut histamine cleanup.
Pretty much.
Yep.
Then the other one is HNMT.
HNMT.
Histamine N-methyltransferase. This one works more inside your cells throughout your tissues. It's important for managing histamine involved in inflammation, tissue repair, that kind of thing.
So two different enzymes working in different places.
Broadly speaking, yes. And the sources suggest that if these enzymes aren't working properly, maybe you don't have enough, or they just aren't functioning efficiently, that's a major reason histamine can build up.
Leading to histaminosis.
Exactly. It's presented as a potential root cause. And your sources really prompt us to ask, why aren't we looking at the base of the problem?
Right. Instead of just the symptoms, dig deeper.
Go deeper. Figure out why the cleanup crew isn't working.
So what factors do your sources say contribute to these enzymes malfunctioning or histamine building up?
Well, they talk about several interconnected things. We already mentioned dysbiosis, that gut bacteria imbalance.
What a vicious cycle idea.
Right. It affects your microbes, your nutrient absorption, and seems tightly linked with histamine management, according to the material. It's complex.
And then there's something the sources seem to really emphasize. Stress.
Chronic stress and cortisol, yeah. This is presented as a really central piece.
How so?
The sources link persistently high cortisol levels. From ongoing stress, unresolved problems, maybe constant worrying, to being permanently elevated. And this doesn't just mess with sleep and appetite and cause inflammation.
Which is bad enough.
Right. But the critical link your sources make is that high cortisol directly impairs histamine recycling.
Wow. Okay, so the stress hormone itself directly interferes with breaking down histamine. Do the sources explain how it does that?
They state the direct impairment is the key issue stemming from that persistent high level. It's not just about momentary stress, but that chronic state. This connection, they suggest, could explain why maybe modern life stressors seem to trigger histamine issues for people.
Like suddenly developing allergies you never had?
Exactly. To pollen, dust mites, cat hair things that maybe didn't bother you before, the underlying stress might be compromising your ability to handle histamine.
So tackling that chronic stress pathway is like fundamental for histamine balance, according to these sources.
Absolutely fundamental. The material also points to the health of your liver and kidneys.
How do they fit in?
The sources call them the body's recycling laboratories. They play a huge role in breaking down histamine enzymatically. So if your liver is struggling, maybe fatty liver or just generally overloaded, or your kidneys aren't functioning optimally,
That can also impair histamine clearance?
that's what the sources indicate, yes.
Yeah.
It adds to the overall histamine burden.
And the gut barrier comes up again, too.
It does. A leaky gut or compromised gut barrier is also linked in the material to problems with managing histamine properly.
So it really sounds like a combination of factors, usually gut health, stress, organ function, all playing together.
Very much an interconnected picture presented in these sources. It's rarely just one thing in isolation.
Okay, so given this complexity, how do the sources suggest approaching this? First, how do you even know for sure if histamine is the issue?
Well, the symptoms are a big clue, obviously. But your sources do mention that a blood test can be helpful, specifically checking the levels of that DAO enzyme.
The gut histamine enzyme.
Right. If DAO levels are low, it helps confirm that enzyme deficiency is likely a major factor, and that allows for, more targeted support.
And regardless of testing, what's the absolute starting point for trying to fix things according to the material?
The sources are really clear on this. They call the core lifestyle changes point number one, the foundation, meaning things like actively reducing that persistent stress to lower cortisol, prioritizing deep, restful sleep, eating what they call a real and conscious diet.
So whole foods, less processed stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Avoiding ultra-processed and refined foods is key. And they make a really crucial point here.
Which is?
Just going on a strict low-histamine diet might not be enough on its own.
Oh, why not?
Because if you don't fix the underlying reasons why you're reacting to histamine, the stress, the gut issues, the enzyme problems, just avoiding histamine foods might help symptoms short-term, but it doesn't solve the root cause.
So diet is more like a management tool while you work on the deeper stuff.
That's how the sources seem to position it.
Yeah.
Though managing high histamine foods is definitely part of the picture while you heal, they also stress regular movement, physical exercise.
Get outside.
Yep, contact with sun and nature. Basically, improving your overall lifestyle, what they term epigenetic habits, to support your body's natural regulatory systems.
Okay, so that's the foundation. Once it's being addressed, do the sources mention specific nutrients or supplements that can help?
They do. They list several that target the mechanisms we've been talking about. L-glutamine, for instance.
What does that do?
It's mentioned for helping to heal and seal the gut barrier. A healthier gut lining means better histamine management and recycling.
Makes sense. What else?
Quercetin comes up. It's highlighted specifically for helping to manage histamine release from mast cells.
Those are the immune cells involved in allergic reactions.
Right, mast cells and basophils. Quercetin helps kind of calm them down, balance their response, according to the material.
Any other immune support mentioned?
Zinc is listed. It helps modulate the immune system generally and aids in proper histamine management, maybe preventing those really exaggerated responses.
Huh.
Vitamin C also gets a mention as being important for histamine breakdown.
Okay. And what about directly supporting those key enzymes like DAO?
Ah, yes. Vitamin B6 is crucial here, especially its active form, P5P.
B6. Why B6?
Your sources describe it as a really important cofactor for the DAO enzyme, meaning DAO needs B6 to work properly and efficiently. So ensuring you have enough B6 is presented as key for histamine breakdown, especially from food in the gut.
Can you just take the DAO enzyme itself?
Yes, the sources mention taking exogenous DAO supplements, but they frame it more as a temporary support.
Like while you're fixing the other stuff?
Exactly. Especially if that blood test confirmed low DAO levels. It can help manage symptoms while you address the root causes.
Gotcha. Anything else on the supplement list from the sources?
Magnesium is mentioned. They call it a bit of a wild card because it does so many things.
Like what in this context?
Supports brain function, which ties into the neurocognitive aspects, and it also helps manage and modulate those mast cells we talked about. Magnesium glycinate or threonate are mentioned for brain benefits specifically.
Okay. And what about supporting the liver and kidneys, those recycling labs?
For liver support, the sources mention NAC, N-acetylcysteine, and also liposomal glutathione. These basically provide tools and fuel for the liver's detox pathways, which are needed for histamine recycling.
Right. And what about probiotics? People always talk about probiotics for gut health.
They are mentioned, yes, but with a really significant warning or caveat in the source material.
Oh, what's the warning?
The sources strongly advise against just taking a general, broad-spectrum probiotic off the shelf
Why is that?
because they argue you need to know which specific microbial structures are out of balance in your gut, what's missing, what's overgrown. Taking a generic mix without knowing that, they warn, could actually make histamine symptoms worse for some people.
Wow. Okay. So it needs to be much more targeted.
Very targeted, yes, based on specific testing and ideally supervised. Individualized use is the key message there if probiotics are used at all.
So really, the big takeaway from all the source material seems to be that you can't just pick one thing. It's about an integrated approach.
That really sums it up. Tackling those foundational lifestyle factors, stress, sleep, diet, movement, and then using targeted nutritional support where it makes sense based on the underlying issues, not just chasing symptoms or only changing your diet.
Right. It paints histamine as this incredibly vital molecule,
Absolutely essential.
but its balance is delicate. And things like chronic stress, gut health problems, enzyme function, even how well your organs are working, they can all throw it off kilter.
And when that happens, you get that whole cascade of confusing, seemingly random symptoms showing up all over your body.
And the material you shared really drives home that getting to the root means looking at that whole integrated picture. Lifestyle first, then targeted support.
Exactly. It's about supporting the body's own ability to regulate histamine properly again.
So, thinking about all this, considering how deeply things like our stress levels, our gut health, even sleep are linked to this one molecule, according to these sources,
Mm.
what does that really tell us?
Well, it really highlights the importance of seeing our bodies as this incredibly interconnected system, doesn't it? Not just separate parts.
Yeah, and maybe it makes you wonder, how might the pressures and pace of modern life be, perhaps quietly, impacting these really fundamental biological processes for you?
That's a really powerful thought to end on, something to mull over.
We really hope this deep dive into the source material you provided has sparked some connections or offered some valuable insights. Maybe think about which part of this conversation really resonated with you and what you might want to explore further based on this information.